just for you this life and the next. Chapter 1. Let us improvise. The piercing scent of the hospital-grade disinfectant filled the hallways of the hospital. Gillian Wesley hurried down the hall to Derek Marco's room. She pinched her nose with one hand. In the other, she had an insulated bag. Derek Marco was her boyfriend. He was hospitalized due to stomach issues and Gillian Wesley had come to visit him. When Gillian reached his room, she heard a feminine whimper coming from inside. Why was there a girl's voice coming from Derek's room? Gillian was puzzled. Her heart beat loudly in her chest, and a sense of dread filled her. Her hand was shaking as she raised it and pushed the door open. There was a loud gasp as the door opened. The man and woman who were in the middle of an embrace froze and turned towards the door. The three of them froze and stared at each other. Gillian's disbelief turned to anger and shame. The two stuck in an embrace were no one but her boyfriend, Derek Marco, and sister, Lillian Wesley. Gillian felt as if all the strength had left her body. She didn't even have the strength to leave. It was as if her feet were nailed to the floor. What do you think you're doing? Gillian was stuttering out of shock. The bag slipped out of her slack hands and fell to the ground. The chicken soup she had brought spilled all over the floor. While Derek had been hospitalized for stomach problems, Gillian had painstakingly brewed the soup for 5 hours, only to arrive to this scene. Compared to her shock and horror, Derek and Lillian were much calmer than she was. They exchanged glances, stood up from the couch, and casually adjusted their rumpled clothing. Derek wrapped an arm around Lillian and raised an eyebrow challengingly at Gillian. Gillian, I guess there's no point hiding things anymore. As you saw, Lillian and I are together. I love her. Let us break up. Derek, have you lost your mind? Gillian burst out and glared at the shameless man. Don't you know that Lillian is my sister? How can you lie to the both of us like this? Come now, dear sister of mine. Derek never lied to me. We are deep in love. Lillian sneered. As they spoke, the both of them turned to stare deeply into each other's eyes. Derek lifted her hand up to his lips and kissed it. Shut up. Gillian was so triggered she saw red. She raised her hand and pointed at Lillian. Lillian, you have a fiancé. What would Henry Porter's family think? How can you disgrace our family like this? Lillian laughed uncontrollably. Her head dropped backwards as she laughed in contempt. Did you really think that I'd marry him? A blind, crippled man like him? Rumors had spread about Henry from the Porter family. While handsome, he was blind. Who would marry such a man? Gillian harumphed. That was decided by Grandpa for you. Weren't you excited to marry him? Did you turn down the arrangement because Henry is disabled? Despicable. Lillian snorted. I'll let you in on a secret. Grandpa originally wanted you to marry Henry. I thought Henry was so handsome back then that I changed your name to mine on the arrangement. Little did I know that he'd end up disabled. Gillian's eyes widened at the confession. Lillian, how can you make up such a story for this scumbag? You can go back and ask Mom and Dad if you don't believe me. Lillian had nothing to fear. I wanted to take responsibility for my actions and marry that blind man, but when I met Derek, I realized that he was the one I loved. She hugged Derek's arm tighter and cuddled up to him. You, Gillian clenched her fists. Her face flushed in anger. Even though they weren't blood related, they had grown up together. As the older sister, Gillian had put up with Lillian's arrogance and domineering ways. But she never once thought that Lillian would do such a despicable thing. Did 20 years of sisterly love mean nothing when faced with a man? You have no shame. Gillian bit out at Lillian. Her eyes were red with anger. But she did not let her tears fall. She pointed a shaky finger at Derek and cursed him. You cockroach. You're going to regret this. One day. Gillian ran out but stopped when she saw a wheelchair turning the corner. Miss Wesley, please stay, a low melodic voice said. The man in the wheelchair reached out to stop her. Gillian looked down at the man. The man was wearing a white button-down shirt. His features were sharp and chiseled like a Greek god. His only flaw were his eyes. They were dim. He was obviously blind. "Mr. Porter," Gillian called out in surprise. Even though he was blind and sat in a wheelchair, it did not diminish the sense of formidableness he had around him. He was Henry Porter, from the city's most affluent and influential family, the Porters. Also, her sister's fiancé. Henry rolled forwards and smiled at Gillian. "Are you interested in marrying me?" "Huh?" Gillian was stunned, but she quickly caught on. Henry probably knew about the affair Derek and Lillian were having. Henry sensed her hesitation and said, "Since we've both been betrayed, we might as well make do of a bad situation and get married." Despite being blind, Henry smiled brightly, as if he was not bothered with being cheated on. Rather, he seemed to be quite happy with the conclusion. "Or did you not want to marry a blind and crippled useless person like me?" "No, that is not what I mean." Gillian shook her head quickly. "It is just so sudden." Henry reached out, and with one strong tug, he pulled her into his arms. She perched on his lap as he whispered into her ear, "Marry me. With the Porter's name you will have the power to do anything you want." His clean, masculine scent enveloped her and was a shock to her system. She wanted to push him away, but he held firm and pressed her deeper into his embrace. Henry smiled wickedly and murmured into her ear, "Relax. It is just a marriage on paper. I am crippled from the waist down. I want to exactly be able to have a physical relationship with you." Gillian broke free of his hold. "I need time to think about it." Welcome to download Bravonovel app to read more chapters of Just For You This Life and the Next novel online.